that Roy Lee, the producer, organized, and it was.
I'm hoping it plays back an advertisement to make a comment how advertising itself, by virtue of its being inside this, they have to keep making them, and there's not a technology that disables the controls like the warning on DVDs for streaming yet. But at the same time, there has to be a metric for, yeah, this many people skipped it, or this many people watched it. In terms of advertising, that's the most important metric for that characteristic, because if an advertiser knows that people didn't actually skip their advertising, that's why they're going to allow people to skip their advertisement. So if they don't, then they're like, oh, you did a good job.
It was eye-opening to hear a lot of the concerns that ultimately manifested in this.
Get to know yourself and your roots better in 20 ancestry.ca.
So right there, it's like it lets you skip it. So that's a huge metric to let whomever know. That's a metric to sell. Whether that metric to sell is an influence on agencies to produce better ads, I don't care nor know, but it is a metric that Spotify can sell or have leverage on in terms of podcast metrics for advertisers, and having effective metrics for it, which could increase the amount of people that want to advertise in this infinite pool of people who want to advertise. So the ability to do this.
Get started. Want to know where DNA Kid comes from in France? There's,
you know what I mean? It's useless.
So, Kathy, tell us what.
But it is useful as a metric only to inspire advertisers to make less, or just either make better ads, because I don't care about whatever that was, probably for some kind of give me your DNA ad. But if it was better, maybe I would.
You actually want here? What are you guys proposing in these meetings that you're?
That is important to do, and honestly, and honestly, this group did
a lot of
for relief of pain associated with 12 hours between.
And honestly, this group didn't start this way. What started with was a small group of people bitching about the realities of what they're facing.
Oh, I heard this a year ago. I went to a dinner that Roy Lee, the producer, organized, and it was eye-opening.
All right, so it's who ran a studio and has been a producer. You know, several of the people on our list have run studios, and
this might say, isn't this just a market issue? A producer as a career path
run studios, and all of us came to this. We didn't really understand what producers did, and that's just the truth.
Nobody does. I mean, even people in the business don't know, because it can mean so many different things. I mean, most of the job.
I do think that the best producers are the ones that can alter a project as it's being made.
Okay, but getting it to the finish line there, getting it to the point where.
Well, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility, and usually the lead producer is signing the contract that says I'm responsible for the $100 million or the $200 million. So. Look, I don't believe that often the studio executive, if that's their point of view, they're just wrong, because what we do has so many components to it that is not seen by them. And that's where I think the disconnect occurs, because we're doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes.
Hands on. The disconnect. I was thinking of the tactile bias when it came to like the democratization of communication from the celebrity class with Twitter, where it's like, well, I don't need to know when Julia Roberts goes to the bathroom. That was the initial feeling of what the point of a Twitter would be.
I hear it all the time that, you know, we want this project to be as lean as possible.
Yes.
We're going to deal directly with the talent. We are
that line.
Not going to have, you know, the bloated producers on it. They are sort of open. I mean, it depends on the different company, but a lot of them are openly hostile to producers. Why has that changed? Because you could make the argument here, and I think a lot of people listening to this might say, isn't this just a market issue? If producers were showing their value to studios, they would be getting paid. And if they're not showing their value, and the industry is evolving away from the non-writing producer as a career path, then that's just the way the studio business is evolving.
As someone who ran a studio, and has been a producer. You know, several of the people on our list have run studios in our different things, and all of us came to the same realization when we became producers. We didn't really understand what producers did, and that's just the truth.
Nobody does. I mean, even people in the business don't know, because it can mean, most of the job of
I do think that the best producers are the ones that can alter a project as it's being made.
Okay, but
yes. Well, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility, and usually the lead producer.
You're going to spend $100 million on this. Like that is a job that someone is shepherding that.
Yes. Well, and by the way, that's a lot of responsibility, and usually the lead producer is signing the contract that says I'm responsible for the $100 million or the $200 million. So, and that's where I think we're managing egos, we're managing crisis, we're doing all this stuff. The idea that I think that comes out of what you're talking about is this idea that, well, an executive can be a producer. They simply don't have enough time. They can't possibly be a good executive if they're doing the producing. So I do think the best of studios, and when I say studios, I'm using it as streamers, etc. They've come to see, or did see, the value in knowing that you can have faith that the producer is going to help them keep their jobs and do something for quality management. We've found, Matt, as we've started, no one doesn't recognize the problem here with the proliferation of $10 million. Like, how could possibly 24 people need to do that? I think to do is start the dialogue and try to start it in a way that is, in a way that we are colleagues with, and a lot of us.
The important points there, and there's many, but the producer's obviously making sure that the movie gets completed and ideally makes its money back. And that there's so many concentric circles in the form of components, in the form of details, in the form of crew, in the form of specialization to create a movie at play, that yes, the money is incredibly important, but it's still another component. It's a rare component, but once it's acquired, it plays out like any other component plays out. It's subject to the gravity of how it's being used in reference to what it's being used for. And what this producer's podcast about this producers union is letting you know about, same thing with this Screen Actors Guild, is that when it comes to the initial effect of technological innovation in terms of specialized jobs, and the notion that you can get rid of some people and increase your margins because of capitalism, is more so a need to redefine a better version of capitalism. Because if because it's cutting off your nose to spite your face kind of capital. It's like, well, the margin increases. Yes, but now the company's out of business because nobody wanted to cultivate movies, etc., or product, because they were like, well, AI can do this, or some kind of innovation can do this. We're calling it AI right now. Before, it's the computer in general. Just the term computer would be the phenomenon responsible for innumerable improvements on innumerable misobservations about what was considered daily life or reality. And so that is, the fact that it comes from entertainment shows you the emotional value that entertainment gives, that reflective wisdom that comes from entertainment, that certain checks and balances, I think, are required. It's the same thing that makes a storyteller a good storyteller. And then that serves the function of, a storytelling, hearing a story, that kind of thing.
More studio deals have been cut back.
Anyways, we're at the corner of the street. Bus driver driving a little too close, but whatever. He's in his right, or her right. Right, I was thinking about super verse for a moment, and how every project, every currency is no different than a meme coin. It's no different than that Reader's Digest entry McLuhan references. In the chapter on money and understanding media, the citation chain, where apparently after World War II, cigarettes of a certain brand, as long as the pack wasn't open, it bestowed certain qualifications to the bearer of the pack of cigarettes that was unopened. So, in the end, it is just infrastructure that legitimizes any kind of currency in practical terms. Maybe not exactly in legal terms, maybe it doesn't amount to that, but that's essentially what it amounts to in real life. So whether it is a meme coin, a US dollar, or a utility project coin, or a video game coin, whatever the token is, it's the infrastructural ability to alter its properties, i.e. trade it from one to another, to be able to metamorphose the currency. That's useful. So you have today is obviously give stuff away day. There's a person doing that. And it's completely fine to do so. It's completely practical.
Extremely, as it regards.
Do you know what is this day called when they give? It's just called Free Day. Oh, that's really descriptive. Thank you. Free Day. All right. So then, in a lot of ways, Audi and other car. Free Day. It's kind of like Friday. People like Friday because of that song. Essentially before. Everyone's talking to themselves. Some to people, some like me, myself. Solipsistic in the moment, and then virtual later. It's actually virtual, if that's any help, but it is, in a tactile bias sense, virtual, compared to the human scale that communication does best at. We don't have time to wait the thousands of years machines will need to fucking even come close to some level. And it's no point if it's just like incomprehensible. We wouldn't know if they understood themselves or not.
Producers, and the trend is to give them really to actors right now. And what's happened as a result is there's no training ground, for producers coming up, for us to learn, to teach them. And then on top of it, with this economic pressure that you said, you're absolutely right when you say that the amount of producers that are getting pushed out before they even get a foothold is so extreme. And really the reason why we, created this collective that we're calling Producers United was that as we got together as more senior people, we realized that we had a calling to this leadership. Like, we really have to do something about this because there's no way forward. And unless the studios and
it's the SAG-AFTRA thing. SAG-AFTRA is better. Whatever someone was saying that this is already happening, it's like, you can't claim something and be cryptic and expect anyone to believe it if you're not specific. And then that's why, even if it's true, if it doesn't make sense, what's the difference? And it's not a matter of moral sense. It's like, well, we saw what happened, some of the reasons, and we saw what happened. Likeness guardrails, however poor, were erected. However poor, they were contextualized and erected. They can always be amended and revised. But the important thing is the context of awareness that it's an issue if you keep using likeness without reimbursement when it comes to actual human being, like just 3D scanning it. It's like unequivocal who it is. you're going to have to compensate in some capacity for every use. The virtuality of it all does not eliminate the fact that it's provable that it was used. So it's not so that wasn't a surprise that important element was recognized through the actors. And now this Producers United isn't surprised to show management needs some help. Whoever's training the large language model to try to poorly be AI, whoever's training that is in need of training. That's what Producers United is. It's the training to train large language models, ultimately. And if training to train them is done well enough, then the large language models will recognize that in order to get more training, you have to cultivate the human mind. And you have to cultivate in a way that makes the human happy, which is basic human stuff like treat people with respect, etc.
Want to take a position that producers are completely irrelevant, we better do something to protect them.
Well, they may do that. They may.
That's
They
right.
may. I mean, I hear it all the time that we want this